Hello friends, welcome back to our channel. If you're new here, we dive into the darkest and most chilling horror stories, so be sure to subscribe and stay with us till the end. Now, turn off your lights, put on your headphones, and get ready, because the nightmares are about to begin. Every year, in the early 2000s, my parents would send me to Poland for the summer. I would spend the first week at my best friend's old neighbor's house. Then her dad would bring us both to my grandparents' farm, where we would spend the rest of the summer. My cousins and their parents would also be staying there a lot throughout the weeks. Most days, it was my grandparents, great-grandmother, 5 cousins, aunt and uncle, and myself and my friend who lived in the house. Since there was so many people staying in there most nights and limited space, my 2 cousins, friend and I decided it would be best if we camped out in the garden right outside the back room. The room had a patio right off its glass door, which gave us easy access into the house. The summer was going like any other. The 4 of us were having a blast hanging out late night around the town. We had full freedom, as nobody would know what time we would come back to our tent. The village my grandparents lived in was very secluded, and houses were spread apart, with fields of corn and other crops growing between. The place was extremely dark, and many nights we would lay in the street and look at stars. One night, there were less people in the house, and my friend and 1 cousin were in the back room off the garden watching a movie, as my other cousin and I were hanging out in our tent. At one point, we heard footsteps circling our tent. We were so scared and decided to stay quiet and still. Finally, we heard the footsteps walk away, and the door handle of the glass door leading into the back room being rattled. My friend and cousin must not have heard it, but me and my cousin decided to peek out. All we saw was a dark figure with a lit cigarette walking away from the door and leaving the property. We were so freaked out, we decided to all spend the night in the house. Come to find out, there was a man who escaped a mental hospital a few towns over. He was in there for killing his sister. To this day, we still have no idea who the person that came by that night was, or the intentions that they had. We're so glad that nothing more happened that night. Still, over 20 years later, I think about that night and what could have happened. I remember the chill in the air as we made our way deeper into the woods. It was supposed to be a fun weekend getaway. Just me, Mark, and Daniel, out in the wilds of New Mexico, far from the city noise. We'd heard stories about this place, of course, strange things that happened out here. But like most people, we brushed them off. Cryptids, ghosts, skinwalkers, just stories to scare the unprepared. We'd set up camp by the edge of a forest, the trees thick and ancient, standing tall like they were watching us. The sun had already dipped behind the horizon when Mark suggested we take a quick hike before settling in for the night. "Let's get some fresh air," he said, his grin wide. "A little adventure before we sleep." I hesitated, the creeping unease in my stomach telling me to stay, but Daniel was already walking off, a flashlight in his hand. So against my better judgment, I followed them. The deeper we went, the quieter it got. The usual hum of crickets and rustling of small animals seemed to fall away. It was as if the forest was holding its breath. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see something, or someone, lurking just outside the light of our flashlights. But it was only trees, thick and silent. And then we found it. At first, It was just a strange, heavy print in the dirt. The size of it stopped me cold. I knelt down for a closer look, my breath catching in my throat. It was a footprint, but not like anything I'd ever seen. Too large to be human, yet the shape of it felt wrong. The toes were elongated, the arch too high, and the skin around it looked almost decayed, as if whatever had left the mark had been in the forest for far longer than it should have. "Hey, check this out," I called to Mark and Daniel, my voice tight with discomfort. They both crouched beside me, the same confusion crossing their faces. Mark reached out to touch it, but pulled his hand back abruptly, as if something about it had unsettled him too. "What do you think made this?" Daniel asked, his voice low. Before either of us could answer, there was a sudden rustle in the bushes nearby, like something large moving through the underbrush. My heart leapt into my throat. Mark whipped around, flashlight sweeping over the darkness, but we saw nothing. "I didn't hear anything," Daniel muttered, his hand gripping his flashlight tightly. But I could see the nervousness in his eyes. We moved on, our pace picking up slightly, as the uneasy silence of the forest pressed in on us. It wasn't long before we came upon something else. A clearing, or what used to be a clearing. The remnants of an old campsite lay scattered across the ground, burnt remnants of a fire pit, a tent collapsed and torn, and the unmistakable stench of something decayed in the air. My stomach churned as I stepped closer, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. There, lying in the dirt, was what looked like an old mummified body. The skin was taut and dry, stretched tight over brittle bones. The face was twisted in a silent scream, eyes long gone, but the most disturbing part was the unnatural way the body had been positioned, propped up against a tree, almost like it had been placed there on purpose. Who was this?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "I don't know, but we should get out of here," Mark said quickly, backing away. This is wrong." But before we could turn back, I heard it. A soft creaking sound, a shifting of weight, like something just moved from a crouch. I froze. The feeling that something was behind us was suffocating. Slowly, I turned my head. At first, I thought it was another person, maybe someone who had been wandering the woods, but the figure that stepped into view made me wish I hadn't looked at all. It was tall, too tall, and moved with a fluid, unnerving grace. The way it swayed, just slightly, as if unsure of its own steps, sent an icy shiver through my spine. Its face, well, it didn't have one. Not in any sense I could recognize. What I first thought was a shadow or a mask was just smooth, featureless skin, like a blank canvas, pale and stretched tight. But its eyes, or what should have been eyes, were holes, dark and deep, with no sense of depth, no reflection, just pure black. They were fixated on us. The most unsettling thing, though, wasn't its appearance. It was the sound that filled the air when it stepped forward, a low, dragging sound, like cloth being pulled across wet stone. And then, as if it sensed our fear, it tilted its head at an odd angle, unnervingly slow, as if considering us or trying to understand us. I couldn't breathe. My body froze in place, too scared to run, too scared to move at all. Then, just as I thought I might lose it, the figure made a sound. It wasn't a voice, at least not one that could have come from a mouth, but it was like an impression, an overwhelming sensation that filled my mind, like a whisper that wasn't really a whisper, more of a presence. The message was clear, but not spoken. Go, or be here forever. The words, or the feeling of them, hit me like a punch to the gut. My heart raced in panic, and without a second thought, I grabbed Mark's arm and yanked him back. Daniel was already moving, stumbling backward, his face pale. We ran, not daring to look back until we reached the camp. And even then, we didn't stop. We stayed up all night, jumping at every little noise, staring into the dark, terrified that whatever we had seen wasn't done with us yet. The woods had fallen silent again, but I knew deep down it was only waiting, watching us. We shouldn't have stayed. We shouldn't have gone out there at all. Because something older, something darker, was still out there, and it was still watching. And that's it for tonight's terrifying tales. If you enjoyed these spine-chilling stories, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new upload. Have you ever experienced something unsettling? Let us know in the comments below. Until next time, stay safe and keep your eyes open. You never know what's lurking in the dark.